We're live.
All right, thanks. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are at this point, 50 people on the live link, and I'm not sure how many YouTube at this time, but we know there are a number of people watching there as well. This is going to be recorded and available for anybody that couldn't make tonight to be able to watch it sometime, hopefully in the very near future, so that we can make some final decisions about reentry for each of your children. So I wanted to have this particular forum with a focus on elementary. So I will be speaking specifically to the elementary reopening plan, and that is because at the last community forum, I shared some feedback that we received from our initial submission, and we were required to make some revisions. So I collected quite a bit of information from families and then used that information to craft our revision, which has now been approved. So before I get to that point, let me just say I put a statement in the email that went out that it looks like at this point we are going to reopen. I still feel very confidently that that is going to be the case, that we will be given the green light for reopening. And the governor has shared that there are 5 metrics that she's using to make that determination. So I'll just say what the 5 metrics are and tell you where we are in terms of each of the 5 metrics, so you understand why I'm making the statement that I'm making, that I do believe we're reopening on September 14th. So the first metric is the operations plan per the reentry plan, the district reentry plan. So our reentry plan has been submitted, reviewed, and approved. And we have covered everything that we are required to cover according to the guidance that was submitted to us. The second metric is supplies. We have all of the supplies that we need to get started. And we're confident that we are prepared for any scenario. The next metric has to do with testing, and the goal was a 48 to 72 hour turnaround on test results. According to the conversation that I had with the governor's office yesterday, it looks like the testing turnaround time will actually be faster than that. So we are within the parameters that were stated according to the governor's metrics. The next metric is local rates. So this is the Exeter and West Greenwich infection rate, spread rate, hospitalization. So we've been tracking those numbers in our communities. Those numbers are, those rates are very low and consistently low. And I do not see that trend changing between now and the 31st, which is next week, next Monday, when the governor is going to make her official announcement about the reopening of schools. And then the last metric has to do with statewide readiness, and that is, according to the metric, the phase that the state is in. And according to the governor's office, we need to be in phase 3 or higher. We are currently in phase 3, and I am pretty confident that she will not change that phase between now and Monday. So given that information, it is my expectation that we will be cleared to open on the first day of school, which according to the statewide calendar is now September 14th for children. And according to the district calendar, teachers will report next Tuesday for 7 days of professional development and training, so that we are completely prepared with understanding all of the safety protocols that are necessary, as well as the instructional strategies that will be necessary for instructing kids both remotely and in person, given that we do expect there to be times when kids, individual children, families, classes, groups of kids may be quarantined. And so we just need to be prepared for that. So we believe that the 7 days, which is a pretty full agenda that we've developed, will have us completely prepared for kids when they arrive on September 14th. So I do not think that we will be hearing anything other than that Exeter West Greenwich will be cleared to open, and I suspect, in fact, if I were a betting man, I would put money on it, that it will be a full reopening. So that's what my expectation is for Monday's announcement. Now, I am not the governor, and I do not make the decision, but again, based on everything that I know, I expect that to be the announcement. So what does that mean? In terms of a full reopening, our full reopening plan has basically remained the same. And that means that all children in the elementary schools, Wawalum and Metcalf, will be allowed to come to school under the full plan 5 days a week. Lynham, I'm not talking about Lynham because Lynham's plan is exactly the same across all scenarios. All kids will attend every day under every scenario for reentry. Their class size is extremely small, the preschool classroom, and they will stay within the pod size requirements regardless of the reentry plan. So Lynham is good. That plan has not changed. So at Wawalum and at Metcalf, under the full reentry plan, it is 5 days a week, all children are allowed to be in school. It is determined, if that's the announcement, it has been determined that it is safe for children to return, and we are opening up our doors for all. What we have done, however, is to be a little bit creative in terms of the start and end times of school, so that we can meet the requirements of bus ridership, and we can limit the number of students that are entering and exiting the building at any given time because of congregation and that kind of thing. So again, consistent with the plan that we originally submitted, the younger children in grades K through 3 will actually start their school day approximately 1 period later, and they will stay until the normal end time, the normal scheduled end time. And the older elementary children in grades 4 through 6 will come in at the normal time in the morning, but they will leave approximately 1 period early. So again, the rationale for us is that we would never be able to meet all of the safety requirements of ridership on the buses if all of the kids were on in the same tier. So we had to add a second tier of busing. And I've worked with the bus company. In fact, we had a great conversation today. And the routes are all developed. And the ridership is within the parameters that are required according to the guidance that was given to us. What that means is that the children will be in school for approximately 1 hour less than under normal circumstances, because they're either coming in a period late or they're leaving a period early. They will have all of their academic instruction with the exception of the specials. And the specials will be offered remotely. So every family will still have the opportunity to participate, have their children participate in 4 specials. Art is not going to be offered. And that has to do with the fact that our budgeting issues that we had, both of our art teachers took a leave of absence, so we just did not replace them. And art will not be an offering. That has to do with budgeting. That has nothing to do with the scheduling due to the pandemic. So the remaining specials will be offered, but they will be remotely offered. Teachers will be available. Teachers will post assignments. We'll meet with kids on an as-needed basis, and families can still have their children participate. So that is the full reentry plan. Under the full reentry plan, so we have finalized our staffing plan based on the numbers that we currently know, and I'm going to share some of that information with you. approximately 28% of families have chosen distance learning, full distance learning, because we have offered that as a possibility. And that is a pretty consistent number across all grade levels. So approximately 1 in 4 children, a little bit more than that actually, but approximately 1 out of every 4 children have chosen remote learning, distance learning full time. So we've already reduced the size of the student population in the building at any given time by more than 25% just by offering distance learning to families if that was their preference. We have assigned the children to distance learning classrooms, those that have chosen distance learning full time, and their teachers will be 100% distance learning teachers responsible for a group of kids, approximately 20, in some cases less, 20 per class at most grade levels. And that will be the assignment. That will be the teacher assignment, classroom assignment for the year. Those classrooms themselves have not yet been determined because we continue to have some adjustments based on family preferences, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So thinking about the schools, whatever the normal size of the student population is, it is already reduced by more than 25% because of distance learning. The remaining kids under the full reentry plan, because it has been deemed that we are safe to return, I would encourage families to send their children in. We know that although we think that we were very successful with distance learning to the best of our ability, it is not ideal for instruction for all kids. And many of our children need the face-to-face interaction, need the direct interaction with their teachers. So we want your children in our buildings. And as I've said before, we only want that to be the case if we think that we've provided a safe environment. We've done everything that we're required to do. We are having a visit by the Department of Health that is coming. That will be, they will be visiting us at the end of this week or the beginning of next week at the latest to do a last review and make sure that they're giving us the clearance as well. But at that point, I suspect, based on everything that I know, that they're going to give us the green light, and it has been deemed safe to return. At the elementary schools, we have several classrooms without windows. We have eliminated the use of every one of those classrooms so that every room will have ventilation out with outside air, the ability for air to flow in and out of the classroom. And so again, if it is determined to be safe, which I believe it will, we are encouraging you to send your children in all of the days. However, if there are families that are still uncomfortable with sending their child in every day, we will also offer the opportunity for families to select the partial reentry, even if we have been given the green light for full reentry. That means if you're uncomfortable and you want to only send your child in on the town designated days, which is Monday and Tuesday, Exeter, Thursday and Friday is West Greenwich, and then we will alternate Wednesdays. Under the full reentry plan, you may do that. You may opt for that. And that is one of the surveys that I sent out with the announcement of this community forum, and I will review that survey and what the purpose is at the end of this meeting. Again, we encourage you to send your child all the days under the full reentry plan. But if that bothers you, if you're not comfortable with that, then any families that opt for the partial, we will allow it. And certainly that means the more families that opt for that, the lower the the class size will be on any given day, because we'll have less live in-person bodies in the room. So it will simply reduce class size. All right, let me just quickly take a look at some of the questions before before I run away from them. If we've chosen the full remote plan, do we have to retake the survey to confirm that? So, good question. And by the way, most families, we have like 1,540 families, individual children, that is, not families, but 1,540 individual child responses. So the families have responded. That's roughly 92%, 93% of our entire student population, who have already made a choice of full remote or in person. If the decision that you made on that survey remains unchanged, then you do not need to go back to that survey and redo your answer. The only thing that you should do is, if you've changed your mind, you go on to that survey and you just enter a new response. And I go through it every day, and I just delete the older response and keep the new response. So I am updating those numbers on a daily basis. So can the distance learning children return to school if they decide not to distance learn at a later date? The answer to that question is yes. However, and I will repeat this, we are going to ask families, now that we are this close to the start of school, we're going to ask families to make their choice and then commit to that choice for only 2 weeks. Just give us 2 weeks under your choice of distance learning or in-person learning, so that we can make sure that we kind of work through any of the bumps in the road along the way during our reentry. And then after that 2-week period, if there are families that have a change of circumstances, have a change of opinion, change of mind, we will work with you to make that happen. We do have flexibility. We can make it happen, but we are going to ask families to please give us 2 weeks to just follow through with your last commitment that you've made. We've allowed you to change your mind a lot of times already, but once that commitment is made, give us 2 weeks so that we can just work through the rest of the stuff before we start making adjustments to class lists and distance learning or in-person assignments. In terms of masks, so I will address that. That has been a question. The governor on July, I believe the date was July 29th, the governor has issued a statement that masks are required for all children and all staff at all times, in buildings, in the cafeterias, except when they're eating, on the buses, in the hallways, whether there is 6-foot separation or not. And that is in place for all kids as young as 2, which means preschool right on up are wearing masks. We will build in, and we have built in, mask breaks. Typically, they will happen outdoors whenever that is possible. But it is going to be a little bit of a challenge for some of our kids. So that's the requirement. That's not my decision. That's the requirement according to the governor's office and the Department of Health. So they're agree or disagree, not my call. We are going to wear masks in school. Will the kids be eating lunch in their classrooms? No. The lunch schedule and the recess schedule has been worked out, and kids will be in the cafeteria in smaller groups. They will be distanced. And if there are multiple pods, meaning multiple classrooms in the cafeteria at the same time, they will be 14 feet apart from each other. Same thing at recess. So we are maintaining the pods, but we are going to allow the kids to eat in the cafeteria. We are going to allow the kids to go outside for recess. We're trying to make this as normal as possible. So that's the case. In terms of testing, will the kids be tested at school if the nurse determines they have 2 of those symptoms? We are not a testing site, so we are required to follow the playbook. The playbook I did release to the public in one of my previous communications. You can find it on the COVID-19 tab on the front page of our website. And the nurses will be working directly with the Department of Health. The Department of Health, in the event that we have a child with symptoms, the child will be isolated. We have rooms that are designated. That's one of the things that the Department of Health will be looking at when they come to do their last review before the clear to open is given. And parents will be contacted, and it will be the Department of Health that determines whether or not testing is required. They can administer the tests at school, and they will administer tests at school, but it will be the call of the Department of Health based on the circumstances. They'll send a team over to the school. One of the things that we are going to be sending out, and again, this is a request of the Department of Health, is a form for parents to sign, basically granting pre-permission for the testing to occur. And if parents sign that and their child is exhibiting symptoms, of course, we would contact the parent first to let you know, but we would have permission to conduct those tests. They will not administer a test to an elementary child without parent permission. So the more parents that give that permission up front, the easier it will be for the Department of Health to do what they need to do. If a parent refuses, then the Department of Health is going to treat that child as if he or she were COVID positive, and they will follow the playbook and all the steps that are listed in that playbook for a tested positive case. So that's the new information. Okay. So let me just go a couple of questions. If we choose in person, can we opt into distance at any point in the year? So same thing applies. Whatever decision you've made in person or distance, we're asking you to commit for 2 weeks. After that 2-week period, we're going to release to families the process that you would go through to request a change. And that change can happen in either direction. Okay? All right. So let's go to partial return. So again, under the full return model, we are doing the grade K through 3 starting later, and the grades 4 through 6 starting at the normal time. That we are staggering. Even if you choose to send your child in partially, if we're under the full return plan, that is still in play. So if you're a 4th through 6th grader, you are coming in a period later and you are leaving at the normal scheduled time. If you are a kindergartner through a 3rd grader, you are coming in at the normal time and leaving approximately a period earlier. That's when the teachers will be available to work with the children, and their preparation period will be scheduled when the kids are gone, because it would typically be happening during their specials class. So that's how we're doing that. Again, I suspect that we're going to return under the full model, which is what I just described. So everything else that I talk about is likely not going to be applicable for us for the start of school. It may happen later, but it is likely not going to be our scenario for September 14th, given what we know about the reentry parameters and the current spread rates within our communities. If we move to the partial plan, that's the plan that we needed to resubmit to the Department of Ed. Under the partial plan, they requested that elementary children be given the option of a full return, even under the partial plan. That has a lot to do with parents who are working. These are the kids that need direct instruction more frequently, all good reasons. Our concern was that the parameters, the guidelines for safety are a little bit stricter. And if all of the kids were in the building under the partial return plan, it would have been very difficult for us to achieve all of those parameters that we are required to achieve under the partial plan. So in the last forum, I did an informal poll to see what families were thinking. You know, did they feel comfortable sending their children in, even under partial return? Were they not comfortable with that? And so there was a mix. It was about, on the survey that we did during the forum, it was about 67% of the families that said, no, I only want to send my child in for the 2 days, keep the class sizes small, make sure that you can socially distance. And the other 33% said, I really want my child to go all of the days of school. That was the informal poll. We had about 80 responses on that particular poll. I did send that same survey out after the community forum, and based on 400 responses, the percentages changed a little bit, but it's roughly 55% that want partial, like the true definition of partial, only send their child in on the town designated days, and the other 45% chose the full reentry, meaning all of the days. So we did some calculations. Let's say that, and I put those right in the reentry plans, which are updated and now on the website for you to look at. But say that there's a classroom of 20 children, then if 55% of the families, and I'm just going to round it off to 50, so 10 of the kids are choosing to come to school, or 11 of the kids actually come to school only on their designated town days, then that means that of the 11 children, 5 or 6 per day will be in the building, right? Because they come from one town. And then the other 5 or 6 will be home for distance learning on the opposite days. The remaining 45% of the class, or 9 of the children, would be in school every day. That's according to the parents' preference. So if you take the 9 that are there every day, plus the 5 or 6 that are there on an every other day basis, then you're looking at class sizes of roughly 14, 15 kids. With class sizes that small, we can implement the 6 feet of social distancing that is required. And we have bus routes that are determined that will allow the ridership on the buses to be such that we meet all of those safety parameters as well. So we're a small community, and we, based on the surveys, which have been really, really important. I mean, I know we've given you a lot, but I am looking at the results every single day, and those surveys are informing many of the decisions that we're making. We're trying our best to give you exactly what you want, knowing that every family has different wants. And not every community is able to do that. This is one of the benefits of us being small. So when I ask for the surveys to be completed, it's super important, because it is your chance to say what you want and for us to know what you want so we can plan for what you want. If we don't know, it's going to be really hard for us to figure this out. So we've decided then that instead of saying under full return, everybody returns, period, and under partial return, only certain towns come on certain days, we've decided not to do that, because the numbers support that we can make it work, given the percentage of families that want their children in every day and the percentage of families that would prefer, under the partial plan, to only send their children in on the designated days. So that's the big change. Under our initial plan, it was everybody goes to school on their designated days, and that was it. And we would offer the everyday option just for a select students who had the greatest need. On our new scenario, if you want your child in, we will allow it. So that's the plan. But what that means for us is we need to know what your preference is. So if you've chosen distance learning, we already know that, or you're going to tell us that by making sure that your survey response is correct. So if you forgot what you said and you want to go in and just put a new answer in, even if it's the same answer as before, I will be able to see that there's a duplicate, and I'll delete your old response. Once we know all the kids that we're pulling out for full distance learning, then we need to know are families opting to send their children in every day under the full return plan or every available day under the partial plan. And under the partial plan, we are still going to do remote Wednesdays. And that is so that we can do a deep cleaning on Wednesdays in the middle of the week. So you have the option. You certainly have the option, but you have to tell us what it is. Under that scenario and under the limited return scenario, we are still looking at children who have the greatest need and inviting them to come all of the days. We've developed a list. We have allowed families to request that be granted to them. And again, this is for both partial and limited. We've received a number of requests. They have been reviewed at each school. And not every school has started to communicate that information back out to families, to speak with families who have made the request, but that is happening this week. And so if people are interested in knowing what the decision is or engaging in the conversation so the final decision can be made, that will be happening this week. So that's that. I mean, I think our plan basically says, whatever you want, we're going to work really hard to make it happen for you. And based on the statistics that we've collected through the surveys, we believe that we can meet all of the safety protocols under every scenario by giving the parents what they want. Now, that would change if and only if we sent out the survey, 55% of the families said, I don't want to send my child every day. I prefer it under the partial reentry plan. I prefer that they only go the 2 days a week. And then when I say, we'll give you what you want, every single family says, it's the partial return. We're sending our kid every single day. Then it's going to create a problem for us because we will not be able to meet the social distancing requirements that are in the guidelines. So that's why we are going to ask every family to respond to yet another survey, but this is the information, the final information that we need to create the class lists so that the numbers work and the social distancing works. So we still have some work to do. And it's like almost September and kids are scheduled to return on September 14th. So we want to get this information as quickly as possible so we can make it happen. All right, let me answer a couple of questions. So the deep cleaning schedule, let me talk a little bit about that. The Department of Health has issued some really clear guidance around what the cleaning protocols are. And certainly when the kids are not in school, there are deep cleanings that are happening at night on the Wednesdays, if we're under the partial return model, which I don't believe we will be. Again, I said, partial limited is probably not what we're talking about on September 14th. It's the full return that I believe we're going to be given here for. And in addition to that, there are requirements around sanitizing high-touch areas, if there are shared materials, desktops in between groups of kids. So at the elementary level, since we're sticking with pods where the kids are basically staying together and basically in a similar space that's not going to be shared with other kids in the course of the day, then we're not changing classrooms and a new group of kids comes in the second period and we have to clean the desk in between that. It's the same child for basically the day. So it's limited really then to high touch areas like doorknobs, or if there are shared materials. We are limiting shared materials to only that which is absolutely necessary, even if that means we had to purchase extra so that every child has their own material. So it's not shared. That limits the amount of sanitizing and that we need to do in between. And then bathrooms. So bathrooms are, each pod of kids will have a designated bathroom. And yes, there is some sanitizing that needs to be done. We are going to ask kids to help us They're not responsible for everything, but we're going to ask them to help us, so they get in the habit of, if they touch the faucet, there's, wipes that they're going to use to wipe off the faucet. We're going to teach them how to do that. We're going to monitor that. And the same thing, by the way, in terms of the cafeteria. So in between seatings in the cafeteria, there's time. So the kids will not leave the cafeteria with the next group coming in using the same tables. There is time for the custodial staff to do a full cleaning of all of the tables and the seating according to the guidance that's been provided to us by RIDO. Outside of the normal custodial staff, we also are going to designate a number of our existing employees, our Council 94 employees. We have not laid any of them off. These are the non-certified staff. But given that 28% of the population is not coming in, and at our junior and senior high school, only half of the population is going to be there on any given day under every plan, including full. We don't need the same number of teacher assistants and non-certified support that we typically need. Instead of laying them off, we have asked for volunteers to move into a quasi-custodial role, and they will be responsible for assisting with sanitizing, including bathrooms and doorknobs and desktops and all of those high-touch areas. There will be extra staff that is assigned at every single building to make sure that all of those things happen and that we have the staff to do it. And the nice thing is, I am not spending a single dime extra to get that done, because I'm just utilizing the staff that we currently have in a different way. And that's because they volunteered to do it, to make this work for your children. So it's pretty awesome that has happened for us. So that's the cleaning. All right, so the drop-off time, if we do not use the bus, so the start and end time of school, I don't have the exact figures on those, but they are in the reentry plan. And so the start and end time is there. What's not in the reentry plan is the drop-off time or the pickup time for the families that are choosing not to use the bus. But I will make sure that the principals send that information out to all families so that you can prepare accordingly. Good question. Okay, so I've addressed that. All right, so what does the class size look like for full in-person versus partial? I think I just described the partial, where when the parents have choice, that it would be roughly 15 kids is the number that we're looking at. It could vary a little bit from there. In a lot of cases, we've actually reduced the overall class size because we've reassigned some teachers in order to have lower class sizes to start with. We've done that across a number of grade levels. And we've also done that in order to accommodate the distance learning requests, because they didn't all happen in nice classroom size numbers. Of course, the class size limit is 21. So we have 23 kids that have volunteered for distance learning, which means, that's a little bit of a problem. So in order for us to make it all work, we've reassigned some teachers from their previous position. Like, for example, the Wawaloom librarian is not going to be the Wawaloom librarian. She's also a certified reading teacher, and she's a certified grade level classroom teacher. So she has been assigned to a classroom at Wawaloom to help us reduce overall numbers. We've done that in a couple of different instances. So class size itself has been reduced. And then when you take out the families that are choosing not to send their child in every single day, then it just lowers those numbers even more. Under the full return model, again, so every kid every day, then if every family decides Okay, it's been determined to be safe. They have all of the safety protocols in play. They have all the cleaning regimen. They've got that down. We have the extra staff. We're good. Then the class size is going to be the full class size, which is roughly 20. A little bit smaller in some grade levels, a little bit higher in other grade levels, but it's roughly 20. At 20, we are not guaranteeing 6 feet of separation, but it can still be significant, 5 feet. And because kids are still required to wear masks, which is determined to be the biggest, the biggest thing that you can do to prevent the spread, then that's determined to be completely safe. So that's what full return would look like. Okay. Will there be before and after school care? Yes. I don't believe that information has been shared yet, but I know that the before and after school care is going to be extended because of the staggered entry times. So we will need to get that information out. That's one thing that I have not nailed down yet. So let me get that for you. And I'll tell you where you can find the information once I get that answer in a minute, because we have a plan for that. Okay, so this is a private comment, but how long does a change take? I'm thinking that means if you've decided that you want to adjust your decision. I was doing in person, but I really want remote. Again, we've asked people to commit to the 2 weeks. We don't want to make changes in those 2 weeks so we can focus on everything else, make sure that the school year starts off really smoothly. We can address any bumps in the road. But after that 2 weeks, the request can be submitted, and it could be granted within an hour. I mean, it's not something that necessarily takes a really long time. We just need to make sure that we, make all the adjustments that we need to in the computer, in the system, that we're tracking attendance. We need to make sure that the bus company knows. So there's some steps that we have to go through, but it's not really that complex of a request. We're not going to make you wait weeks. You could submit the request in the morning and you could have an answer for the next day. Okay. Okay, in terms of what type of test will be used, again, I don't know. We're not a testing site. It will be the Department of Health, but I suspect, although I can try to get an answer to this. I am on a call tomorrow with Dr. Alexandra Scott from the Department of Health, so I'll ask her the question. But I suspect with the younger children, and this is what we're talking about, elementary age children, that they're going to use a less invasive test, but I can't promise you that. It's really the call of the DOH. I will ask tomorrow during my call, and I will put the answer to that question in an FAQ that we've already started. In fact, we already anticipated many of the questions, so we've written them and written our response to them. I'm simply going to add the responses to the questions that I said I would get answers to that FAQ, which we will post tomorrow, and we'll send it out to everybody so that you can read through that document as well. Will there be any uniform military presence at the school seen by students? No. So I think that question is related to the announcement about the support that the governor is providing where military has been called upon to help schools. That doesn't mean that they're going to be on campus. It doesn't mean that there will be a presence. It's not like having police officers in the building either. They are a resource, and I will be the direct contact for them. But if there's an issue that arises, or if I need supplies that I have not been able to get, and again, I have everything that I need right now, but if I need more and I'm not able to get them, they will help us with those kinds of issues. They are helping some districts with transportation. I have no idea what that looks like. I think that would be pretty exciting for some kids to be driving into school on some of those military vehicles. We're not asking for that level of help. So no, there will not be any additional uniform presence on the schools at all. Are there any mask types that are banned, and are masks provided at school? So there are no mask types that are banned at this point, but sometimes things show up that we could never have anticipated. At this point, there are none that are banned. And yes, we do have a large supply of masks at the schools so that we can provide them for students who didn't bring one or forgot theirs. All right, so there's a couple of questions that keep coming up about the start and leave time for kids in K-3 and 4-6. Ali, I see that you're on. Do you have the ability to look on the document and just get the exact times and then stick them in the chat for start and end for K-3 and start and end for 4-6? All right, thanks. So the assistant principal from Metcalf is going to post the answer to that right in the chat for you. Okay, will grading be different if a child attends full in-person versus distance learning? At the elementary level, there really is not going to be a difference because we use the standards-based grading practices. So it's really about an overall judgment of where the child is relative to the grade level standard. So we still want to have a measure about where the child is relative to the grade level standards, but this is not, so this is like a 1 to 4 scale. This is not, you get a 93 in writing this term. We don't do that. That creates an issue. That kind of grading, the traditional grading model, is an issue for kids that are distance learning. That's a high school conversation. That's a junior high school conversation. But for us, at the elementary level, standards-based grading is actually the recommended grading practice for distance learning. That was in the guidance that we got last year when we did the 3 months of distance learning starting in March. Do you plan to use outdoor spaces as a classroom? This is something that a lot of districts are struggling with because we've worked really hard to make sure that our campuses are secure and safe. And now, being outdoors is considered safer than being in an enclosed space inside. So have we developed any outdoor classrooms at the elementary school? No. Will we allow kids and their teachers to use outdoor space as appropriate? Yes, but we do that anyway now. And the other thing is that in a lot of districts, they're using outdoor spaces and building tents and all kinds of things because many of their classrooms do not have windows. So I was talking to a superintendent last week, and at one of his schools, 75% of the classrooms do not have windows. It's a really old building, so there's no ability for there to be airflow in and out through the opening of windows. We do not have that issue. Every one of the classrooms that we're using has an outside wall that has sufficient windows that we can open. So there will always be the fresh air flow in every single utilized classroom at Metcalf and Wawalum. And yes, we know that there are some classrooms without windows, but we have a number of classrooms that we were able to close because we have full distance learning classrooms at every single grade level. All those classrooms then are not going to be utilized, and anybody that was assigned to a windowless room has been moved. So we're not in the same predicament that other schools are in because all of our rooms have the ability to bring fresh air in daily. Okay. Drop off and pick up rules for parents. So again, those are going to be communicated by the principals of the buildings. I know that they're working on it, but in general, we are not allowing people in the building. So if you want to pick up your child, then there will be a door that you're assigned to, and most of the conversation is going to be through the intercom. We have the ability to show ID for those of you that are not known to the person that's checking through the window, and then we will bring children to you for pickup. and then we will meet the child at the door and bring the child in at drop-off. So again, the only additional people that will be entering the building will be in very rare circumstances. It will be for emergency type situations. It'll be a very rare circumstance. We are limiting access to individuals just to reduce exposure to a different group of people. So the pickup and drop off rules will be that you're not coming in, but you will be able to bring your child to, or we'll meet you right at the car to get the child out of the car and escort them into the appropriate door. And then for pickup, there will be a place for you to pick up. You have to show your ID, just like we always do. Okay, but again, we're not bringing people into the building, and that's true even in the case of a child who is in the nurse who needs to go home. Unless there's some kind of an emergency situation, if the child is able to be escorted from the nurse to the door, that's what we're going to do, because nothing personal, but we want as few people in our buildings as possible. When do we find out if our child is on the list? So I think that's the list of kids that have been invited or parents who have requested the every day for the limited return, because at the elementary level, you have the ability under our plan to send your child in all of the days. Under the full return model, under the partial return model, you can just opt for it. There's not permission that's granted. If that's what you want, we're going to give that to you. So it's really just about, if we get to the place where we're only allowed to have limited return, which is not going to be the case for the opening of school, then we will only be inviting a small number of kids. And it will be by teacher recommendation or parent request, and you've provided a rationale for your request. I think I stated this earlier, that the principals, not all of the principals, have started to make those communications, or to make those contacts with families, but that is starting this week. So I'll remind principals that needs to happen, because a lot of parents want to know. I'm just writing that down. Okay. For partial return, is the school day still shortened? Yes. The only difference under the partial return is that we are going to have, or we suspect that we're going to have significantly fewer children in the buildings, because again, the original plan was that every child would only come in on the designated days. So we're going to have to look at the numbers with the survey that we're going to send out, or that we already sent out, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But we think that we're going to be able to allow all of the kids in K-6 under the partial return model, all of them, to come in. I believe it's the later time, Allie. Is that what we're doing? Under the partial return, everybody comes in later and leaves at the normal time. That's K-6 under the partial return. But again, the only reason for that is because we're anticipating far fewer children in the buildings, which means that we have far fewer children taking the buses, and we're able to meet the ridership requirements according to the Department of Health guidelines. So the only time that we have to stagger it is when we're expecting full return every kid. There's no way that we can meet ridership without adding buses, which don't exist, and adding drivers, which don't exist. So that's the dilemma that we have. So that's the answer to that question. So some questions about training for teachers with distance learning. Yes. Is the distance learning curriculum the same as the direct instruction curriculum? So I just want to be clear about what we're talking about. The curriculum is the same. There are still grade level standards. The approach for instruction might be different, but the goal of instruction is still to get all children to master the grade level standards. Some teachers have been remarkable with this, and some teachers have worked really hard to get better at it, and they know that they still have some work to do. The list of the teachers that have been assigned to distance learning went out today. So it took me a long time to make that work, but it went out this afternoon. And we are going, and some of the most creative, talented, tech-based distance learning teachers are assigned. And we are going to be meeting as a group. So we'll have like a cohort of distance learning teachers that we are going to work with to make sure that they are all well equipped to do the really creative things that some of their colleagues are able to do. And in many cases, we've teamed them up so that you may have a distance learning classroom. So I'm going to just take grade 5 for an example. I have 2 distance learning classrooms that are assigned in grade 5. There are 2 different teachers assigned to each of those distance learning classrooms. Those 2 teachers may do exactly what we would typically do in a normal school year. One teacher may do the ELA and writing, the reading and writing component with both groups of kids, and the other teacher might do the math and science with both groups of kids. So they will still have that opportunity. So, and again, the thinking is then the teachers can really focus on a limited number of content areas so they can really do that well versus having to teach everything and doing all the interactive kinds of activities and project-based learning kinds of activities with kids for every single subject area, right? So if they have to teach 4 or 5 subjects, they're not going to be as creative and as good at it as if they were able to only focus on a couple. So we're doing a number of things to try to help them to be able to provide those kinds of experiences. And the other thing that we're doing is we are creating, and we will publish, a set of distance learning expectations. That is, the frequency with which teachers should be meeting with, having meetings with children, because we heard loud and clear from parents that they wanted that ongoing direct interaction. I know it's virtual, but they still wanted that interaction with their teachers. So we will provide that. And the other thing is that we also know a lot of families do not want their child on a computer for 5 or 6 straight hours a day. Well, guess what? We don't want to be on a computer for 5 or 6 straight hours a day either. So what are some really good strategies where we are really, really selective about when we're meeting with kids and doing direct instruction with kids? And then are we strategic about the kinds of things that we're asking children to do when they're not in the direct presence of the teacher? So again, there are some teachers that really, really did some amazing things. And part of the reason why we're going to be meeting together is so that we can share those and develop those expectations together. And then we're going to communicate those out to all of the children and all the families who are in a complete distance learning setting. So that's our goal there. So if the governor says full days, which I suspect she will, then we can still opt for the partial return. The answer to that is yes, we will allow it. We're encouraging you to send your child in every day. We want your child in every day if the governor says it's safe, and if all of those 5 metrics we've passed, which we know that we have, the Department of Health does their visit, they give us clearance, we want your children in every day. But I don't want a family to feel like, I'm not comfortable, I don't want to send my child in every day, and the only other option I have is to withdraw my child and either homeschool or go complete distance learning. I would rather have your child in for as many of the days as you're comfortable with than no days. Because for every kid, I think in-person learning has benefits that distance learning doesn't have. And I'm not saying we can't do a great job with distance learning, but many children need that direct interaction. So under the full return, when the governor says, and I suspect she will say full return for Exeter West Greenwich, she's not going to say that for every district, but she will say it for us, then yes, all children can come every day. If you're not comfortable with that, if you really have a problem with that, then you can still make the request to be considered for only coming to school on your designated town community days. Okay, we'll make that work. But I am still strongly encouraging you to consider sending your child in. If I didn't feel that it was safe, I would not be telling you that. But I respect everybody's differing opinions, and we will make it work for you. Okay. So if virtual, in other words, if the child, we have a full return, there's 5 kids in the class whose parents don't want to send them every day, so they're going to be virtual on their off days. Will the children have live stream classes by their teacher? That's one option. There are a number of options that the teachers have been looking at. Another option is, depending on the numbers, if we have an entire group of families, say, for example, from West Greenwich, who only want to do the partial return, can we be strategic about how we group the kids in classrooms so that they're present together and they're on distance learning together, so they get to experience both? I don't know that that's going to be able to happen. I think maybe under the partial return model we could do that, but I am not anticipating large numbers of families saying, I don't want my child to go every day if it's been deemed safe enough to call for full return. But I will look at those numbers, and we'll try to be creative about some different possibilities in order for us to do the right thing for all families. So yes, live stream classes are possible, but they may be project-based learning days where the kids are assigned to groups and they're working on a bigger investigation project. A lot of teachers have started to explore that kind of teaching. So that may be an option. It may be a combination of both. So we will communicate that out to people, but it's not going to be dictated that every teacher has to do it this way, because there are many ways to provide high quality instruction remotely. And I don't want to limit teachers to always doing the same thing. I'd rather see them mix it up so that the kids can stay engaged and stay interested in different kinds of activities that are provided. Would you be expecting the kindergartners to be using sanitizing wipes to clean? No. So the older kids, they can help, but kindergartners, I'll just tell a funny story, but we have to teach them what a urinal is. We're not going to be asking them to do sanitizing. They have a lot to learn, but we have a lot more supports that are available at Wawaloom, which has our younger grades. So we have additional teacher assistants there. We always have had additional teacher assistants there, particularly in kindergarten. On top of that, so we're maintaining that level of support, but on top of that, we're adding additional people for sanitizing and so forth. So they will be the ones that are in the bathrooms and making sure that everything is sanitized and wiped down, because we can't expect the youngest children to be able to do that well. Okay. So bathroom sanitized after each use. Yes, to a degree, because they will only be going, we don't have a schedule. Our bodies don't have a schedule where we can only go to the bathroom at these set times. However, pods of kids will be brought to the bathroom together, and they are in the same pod all day long. Now, will they be allowed to sit on the same seat before that somebody else sat in before it's wiped down? No, but they can still be in the bathroom at the same time if they're in their pods. We don't want 20 kids in the bathroom, but it might be safe to put 3 children in the bathroom in separate stalls, for example. But there will always be an adult that is kind of managing the flow in and out of the bathroom. So I think on scheduled bathroom times, that's fairly easy for us to control. But we know, and particularly the younger they are, when they have to go, they just have to go. But that's why we have the additional staff that is available, because they will escort children to the bathroom, and they will make sure that everything is safe before and after the use. So that's kind of the goal there. So the first day of school, the school calendar has been adopted by the school committee, revised by the school committee, and revised again by the school committee based on the ongoing changes that we get from the state. The last revision was last night at our school committee meeting. And that calendar is now on our website, and it says at the bottom, revised 8/25/2020. The first day of school is the 14th, September 14th, for all kids in grade 1 through 12. And preschool and kindergarten are doing an orientation, but the orientation is going to be a little bit different. We're not bringing the families in the same way that we've brought them in before. We're going to do almost by appointment. So each classroom might have 3 families that come in at a time, and there'll be designated seating in the classroom, so there's good separation. So they're putting together a good plan, but they're not bringing huge groups of parents into buildings while school is in session for the first graders. So yes, there will be an orientation. It will look different, but it will still provide the families the opportunity, particularly with kindergartners. And in some cases, this is the first school experience for kindergartners. So that comfort of having the parent be present with them, we will still provide that opportunity. So transitional period for first graders, since the time was cut short. I know that there are discussions at each building about how we're going to kind of provide that opportunity for there to be some closure. But I just want you all to be aware that we have had a number of staffing changes. So we're going to do that wherever it's possible. But, you know, I have some teachers that cannot return because of their own health concerns, and they may be in a distance learning environment. I have volunteers that are doing distance learning. We have teachers that have retired. We have teachers that we had to change grade levels based on enrollment numbers. So we have had teachers that have had to change schools. You know, we have a low number of kids that have enrolled in kindergarten. It's not a mandatory grade level, and a lot of families have chosen not to start their child in kindergarten. So we have a low number of kids enrolled. I had 6 classroom teachers. I don't need 6 classroom teachers. So I moved a kindergarten teacher out of Wawaloom into grade 2 to help me lower class size in grade 2. So I did a lot of moving around in order to limit class size. So yes, we're going to do some transition type work, but it's not going to be perfect because the teachers that the children had last year may or may not still be there. So I just want to be honest about that. Okay, so yes, we're going to do some transition work. It just may be that they can't connect with their last year's teacher, because I'll say she, because that's 99% of them. She may not be there. Okay. So the mask requirement, I think that the mask requirement could change, but again, I just want to be really clear about this. This is not my call. This is initially the guidance was that there were times and circumstances where masks were recommended but not necessarily required, and then that guidance changed, and so they've determined that mask wearing is the best thing that we can do to prevent the spread, and they are requiring it. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of families that are worried about kids, about being around others, whether it be kids or adults that don't have masks on. There are a lot of adults that are worried about being around others, kids or adults that don't have masks on. It's really, their rationale is it provides a level of safety and comfort for everybody that's around them. It's one of the best ways to prevent the spread. And that's their rule. So could it change? Yes. Maybe if the spread rate in the state continues to go down or begins to go down again, and then continues in that path, they may relax those requirements. I don't really know. And who knows what it's going to look like after December. December is like in the middle of flu season. And if flu season is bad, we could be in a position where we have stricter requirements. That's a time where we may go from full return to partial return to limited return, depending on what's happening across the state and in our communities. So it's really hard for me to predict. But the mask requirement will not be in place forever. At some point, it will be lifted. And when it is lifted, we will lift it. But I just have to wait for the call to happen from the DOH. Okay, so Allie posted the school day for 2 and 3 and 4 to 6. So the kindergarten and first grade is the same grades 2 and 3. So it's the 9:37 to 3 o'clock. I mean, that may be like, it may be a few minutes off because, Wawaloom and Metcalf, the kids ride the same bus. So one of the schools gets dropped off first and then the next school gets dropped off. So one of those buildings is a few minutes different just to account for the ride from Wawaloom to Metcalf or Metcalf to Wawaloom, however that goes. But that's roughly the start and end times. The Wawaloom plan, however, the current version of the reentry plan that is posted online is the revised version. So if you go onto our website and at the very top, there's a COVID-19 tab. If you click that, on the left-hand side of the page that you open up is the reentry plan, and it's clearly labeled Exeter West Greenwich Reentry Revised 8/24/2020. That's the plan that we resubmitted. And in the document, there are many places where you can click on the link to the Wawaloom plan, and their schedule and all the times are right in there. So again, 9:37 to 3 is roughly the right answer, but if you really want to be more specific, you can go to that Wawaloom plan and look at those numbers. I'm sorry, I just don't have them memorized at this time.
I put them a couple comments down, Jim.
Oh, awesome.
I can to look up Wawaloom.
Well, then just tell me to shut up next time so that I can move on to the next thing. All right. So RICAS, at this point, we are told that they are happening, but my preference is that they not happen. And the Department of Ed, in our conversations with them, they've said that it is the state assessments are a federal requirement. So it's only if the federal government relaxes the requirement that RIDE then can decide to relax the state requirement, which I believe that they would be willing to do, but we have to wait for the announcement from the federal government in order to give us permission to make a decision at the state level. I am not in a position where I can just make the call to say we're not doing RICAS at Exeter West Greenwich. That's not my call. That's the Commissioner of Education's call. And she can only make that call if given permission from the federal DOE. I'm going to put my light on, so excuse me for 1 second. After the 2-week grace period, we want to switch our child to distance learning. Will they change classrooms and teachers? Yes. Because the distance learning classrooms are assigned to specific teachers, and so we, that's the only way for us to make that happen. Kindergartners don't start on the 14th, right? They will start on the next day. They'll have an orientation on the 14th, and their first full day of school will be on the 15th. That's true for pre-K and K only. Good question about students with IEPs that are distance learning. Will their services also still be available remotely? They will be available remotely. Depending on the degree of the service. In some cases, if the child requires more intensive services, it's awfully hard to deliver those services remotely at the same level of quality that we would be able to provide in person. But a child who has more intensive special education needs is likely to be on the invite list for full return. So if we are saying, please, we want your child to come in for full return under any plan, under the partial, under the limited, consider that, because we want to provide the best service. And if we believe that best service is provided face-to-face, then we want to be able to do that. All of our special educators and all of our specialists, like reading specialists and interventionists, they will all be working with kids in small groups. There are additional precautions that are in place in those classrooms. We have safety barriers that we've created, clear barriers, and the kids will be in small groups, and they'll be able to work with the appropriate amount of social distance. So yes, if we have asked you to consider sending your child in, please consider it. But if you are choosing distance learning, we respect that, and we will provide service. If I'm just being honest, it may not be the same quality, because you can't necessarily do the same level of work remotely, particularly with kids that have certain areas of need. But we will do our best. Okay, so if there are children who have a particular condition where mask wearing is problematic, so there's a health condition, there is a mental health condition, there is anxiety, and it's significant, where wearing a mask is going to be a problem. There are some alternatives, and we will work with you. But if you believe that is the case for your child, the sooner we know that, the better. And you can just simply send me or your principal or the director of special education, and it doesn't matter if your child has an IEP or not. But if you send a message privately to any of the four of us, and maybe either Ali or Marie, maybe somebody can just put the email addresses in the chat of the two principals, Sarah, the director of special education, and myself. But let us know that that's a concern, because if we can get that resolved before the school year begins, it'll just make it easier for everybody. The transition into the in-person setting will just make it easier for everyone. Okay, so the bus schedule is I met with Scott at the bus company today, and he does have the schedule worked out. What we're doing now is matching his bus list with the children who are going to be distance learning. And I granted that there still could be changes, but he's cross-referencing those lists, because that may reduce the number of stops on certain bus routes, which would then change the times, the anticipated time of arrival at those bus stops. So he probably has a few more days of work to do before they're published. And he doesn't want to publish a bus route before the governor makes the official call that it's full return. Because if he publishes one set of routes and times, and then by surprise we're told it's partial return, which again I don't think is happening, but I'm not the governor yet, and then he has to publish a different one, then people are going to be looking at the wrong lists and everything else. So and I think he's right, he's holding off on any public publication until after the governor's announcement, and then he's going to do one final cross-reference of distance learning requests to make sure that he has the right bus stops on the routes and then they will go out. So you'll get them in time, certainly, but there are still some details that we're trying to work out in order for those bus routes to be published accurately. So bear with us on that. Speech therapy. So the speech therapists are the specialists. They're like the reading specialists, the special educators. They will work with children. We're going to do a lot more services outside of the classroom than we have typically done, just because we're trying to reduce the number of adults that are in the room with other kids that they're not necessarily working with. So we're really working hard to reduce all of the exposure. So that will happen, and it will likely be one-on-one, or the speech teacher with a couple of kids, and again, the plexiglass dividers, socially distanced, separate setting. So that's how that's going to work. Okay. So teachers required to be tested. So they will be tested according to the CDC guidance, they're not required to be tested at this point unless there are symptoms, and teachers can get tested, and they actually can go to a site to have rapid testing. We've asked the question if the governor is going to announce that teachers are essential workers, because we've heard some rumor that may happen. And if we are all considered essential workers, we may be required to have a test before entry. That hasn't happened yet. And I can't require something that isn't required by the Department of Health. However, if there are symptoms, then those symptoms, we need to treat in the same way that we would for children, and that may require quarantine or positive or negative test results in order for return. We're going to follow that guidebook that was out. Are teachers going to be dressed in gowns and face shields? No. Face masks? Yes. Face shields? No. The nurse will be dressed accordingly, but the teachers, no. Will kids have to wear masks for speech therapy? Okay, great question. We've actually ordered clear face masks for use during speech therapy, particularly for kids who are working on articulation skills. And obviously the speech teacher is looking at the movement of the tongue and the movement of the lips to make sure that articulation is happening in the appropriate way. Hard to do with a face mask on, so they've invented this pretty awesome thing where it is a mask and it is see-through, and the director of special education has ordered them so that we have them on site for kids that are receiving speech therapy for articulation purposes. IEP meetings will be held virtually. Again, if there is we believe that we can do them virtually for the majority of IEP meetings. We have actually purchased DocuSign so that the documents could all even be signed remotely. So to the maximum extent possible, that is what we're going to do. If there are unique circumstances or some kind of a situation where a live meeting is required, we will also accommodate that. We have space that is designated in each of our buildings for meetings to occur. They will be sanitized before and after the meeting happens. They will be in a room that has lots of windows, and we'll do what we need to do. But we are hoping to conduct the majority of IEP meetings remotely. Same thing with parent conferences. Anything that we can do remotely to keep people out of the buildings, that's what we're going to do. But we will accommodate you if there is a unique need or a special circumstance. So if I have a child with an IEP and have already said yes to full in-person learning, should I be expecting some sort of communication, or do I just assume that all is okay? So again, I anticipate that the governor is going to say full return, so everybody's okay to come back full. I think the question is if we are in the limited return at some point during the school year. That's the only scenario where you would need permission in order for the child to attend every day. And so if you've asked for it and nobody has reached out to you, it's because they haven't reached out to you yet. So those phone calls and communications are actually starting this week. And again, it's not going to impact what's happening on the first day of school because we anticipate that we're starting with full reentry. This would only be later on down the road. The governor says things are not going well and we need to move to a limited return model. Under limited return, it's only the children who are invited. And it would be invite by staff of the school or because the parents have requested it and we've agreed together that there's a good rationale for why that child should be in on under the limited return model. So you definitely need to hear something, but it's not something that you need to hear for day one of school because day one of school is going to be open for all kids. That's the anticipated announcement. And those communications from the school to families that have requested it are starting this week. For example, I was at the high school today with the high school admin, and they had just finalized their list and reviewed all the parent requests, and they were just talking about divvying up the list of kids that were approved and making the individual phone calls. Okay. All right. Somebody said I will be governor someday. I don't know that I want that job. Not during a pandemic, anyway. So somebody said, is this email correct? For me, let me just respond. That's private. So that one's done. Okay, when someone in a pod tests positive, does the whole pod and the teacher not have to quarantine at home for 2 weeks? And does this include the families of all the children in the pod as well? If so, does this also count for students, teachers that are not showing symptoms? Okay, so there's a lot there. And that is outlined in the playbook, which everybody has access to. That is posted on our COVID on our website under the COVID tab. But in general, if somebody in a pod tests positive, the answer is no. Not everybody in the pod has to quarantine. However, this is where it becomes really important for us to be super diligent about assigned seats, both on the bus and in classrooms, because there is like a radius, and anybody that is within a particular radius of the child that tests positive will have some quarantining requirements. But it doesn't mean that everybody in the pod will have the same quarantining requirements. And maybe the radius is 6 feet. So anybody or 10 feet or whatever it is, again, I don't have it memorized, but I will tell you that the nurses do. But whatever that radius is, we have seating charts. So we know this child tested positive, we'll have the seating chart, we'll have the bus seating chart, we'll identify all the kids that are within the radius. We will report that information to the Department of Health. They will indicate that quarantining is necessary, and they will give the rules for reentry. Initially I thought somebody in the pod test positive, everybody's quarantined. We're going to have quarantines all over the place. Or somebody has symptoms, everybody has to quarantine. That is not the case. They've gotten a lot more clarity around what is absolutely necessary in terms of quarantining and isolation. And the goal is to not overly use that in cases where people are asymptomatic or have not been in close proximity for extended periods of time. So that's why assigned seats, bus assigned seats, classroom assigned seats, making sure that we are socially distant in cafeterias, 14 feet away from other pods during recess. I mean, all of that has been designated. And we're going to do a really good job of making sure that the kids stay isolated from other pods, simply for this reason, that if there is a case that we don't want the whole school having to quarantine because we've allowed kids to run all over the place and interact with each other, we need to be very, very mindful of where they are and who they're near. And to the degree possible, if we can seat kids on buses that are also in their classroom pods, that also reduces the number of kids that are exposed to any individual child. So those are the kinds of things that we're currently working on. Student has symptoms during school, parents be notified? Yes. It still takes days to get a test result. So would students still be required to return to class while the student is waiting for results? So again, that's going to be the call of the Department of Health. But one of the reentry parameters, one of the metrics that I talked about was the 48 to 72 hour testing window turnaround. And yesterday, when I was on a call with the governor's office, we were told that the turnaround time is going to be, by the time the kids go to school, be less than a day. So I'm not necessarily going to say that that's actually going to happen, but that's the word that we received yesterday, and he was very confident in conveying that. And again, the other thing is that the Department of Health has access to rapid tests, and I explained that for teachers. We have the ability to go and get tested, and we can get our results within hours. If that gets expanded, then perhaps that's something that they'll do for schools as well, so that they can limit the number of kids that are missing instruction and the number of kids that need to be quarantined for extended periods of time. So that's still something under development, but that is Department of Health, not Exeter West Greenwich. Okay. How soon will we know our students' teacher? So typically that would have already happened, but let me just be honest with you. Many parents keep changing their minds about what they want, which is completely fine, and we've allowed that to happen. And I finally today did the full distance learning staffing plan, which means I notified a whole bunch of teachers that I moved them, and they weren't upset because they all volunteered. I mean, think about that. I said, I need volunteers to transfer from a gen ed position to a special ed position, to change grade levels, so that I can accommodate the health needs of some of your colleagues, so that I can move teachers around where I need to reduce class size more. And I had so many people that just said, put me wherever you need me to. I volunteer to do it. That is not typical of a school district. I'm just going to say that. So that staffing plan went out today. So we just really confirmed which teachers are teaching which grade level today. And now we are going to survey one last time to get some additional information that is going to perhaps inform some additional changes that we have to make to the classrooms, so that we can balance, to make sure that a classroom under a partial return doesn't have 22 kids that have opted to go to school every single day, because it kind of defeats the purpose of having partial return and lower class size and 6 feet of social distance. So based on your preferences, which you need to report to me still, and I'm going to give you a really tight timeline, and I know you're all going to meet it for me. But based on that information, we will be able to then finalize those class lists and get them out to you. I would not expect them until at the earliest, the end of next week. And it's not because we haven't been working our rear ends off. It's because there's information that we just need to continue to gather to make sure that everything is in place, so that we can meet all of the requirements according to the Department of Health guidelines. So bear with us on that. Okay. Okay, so if we go to limited return and will the district have laptops and Chromebooks? So the answer to that is yes. We actually have the way that we supply our technology is everything is on a lease. So the leases are 3 years. The lease runs up. We return the devices. We get new devices. It's just built into our operating budget as a recurring cost. So that way we always have computers that work. I'm not saying that some of them don't break, but we always have a good supply of computers that work. We happen to be at the end of our lease period at the end of last year, where we typically send those devices back and get a whole new set of devices for the new 3-year term. And we did that. No, we didn't do that. We have gotten the new leases for the new devices. That has happened, but we also bought out all of the old devices. So instead of returning them, we bought them all out and we have them in stock and available because we anticipated that we were going to have a number of families that chose distance learning, or that we might be in a position where we're required to provide distance learning. And we loaned out a lot of devices last year, and we're going to need to do that again. So we wanted to make sure that we had them available. So the answer is yes, we have them, and any family that needs them, we will provide them. We also have hotspots available for families that might have connectivity issues. And worst case scenario, for the few families that live so far into the woods that they're not even serviced by any cable companies, we will arrange for delivery of hard copy materials if that is what is necessary under a distance learning plan. So hope that answers that question. Okay, so great question. My child has allergies and experiences the same symptoms that are kind of outlined for COVID, and how do we distinguish the difference between the two? So the nurses have been working really closely together and closely with the Department of Health. And the guidance is pretty clear that if there are symptoms that cannot be attributed to the normal child's bodily reactions to the environment, that's when we get concerned. Or if the symptoms are showing up to a greater degree than what has historically happened, that's when we might get concerned. But the guidance is very clear that if the symptoms can be explained by a pre-existing condition, that this is the typical reaction of my child's body to the environment at this time of year, then they're not going to be forced to go into quarantine and have all that other stuff happen. But that's where it's really, really critical for families who have children with those kinds of conditions to be in direct communication with our nursing staff on a regular basis, so that we are not reporting something to the Department of Health that shouldn't be reported. All right. Okay. If a student tests positive, will their name be released? Absolutely not. Okay, it looks like I'm at the end of the questions. So there may be more questions, and I'm happy to stay on as long as you need me to, as long as you want me to. So I'll look back at the chat list in a minute, but let me just go over a couple of things. So I did say that we started a FAQ, frequently asked questions document, with questions that we anticipated you would be asking. And we've written those responses out. I've written down some additional questions that I said I would get back to you with those answers. I will add those to the FAQ document, and that FAQ document will be posted under the COVID-19 tab on the main page of our website, and we'll also send it out in an email communication, a mass email communication to all of the families. So that FAQ will be attached, and you'll have all the answers. I mean, I have 3 questions that I think I didn't answer, unless there are more. I'll add those to the FAQ so that you have it. The other thing that we've done, and by we, I mean a volunteer teacher, because I didn't do it, is that she went through every one of the reentry plans. And our reentry document is pretty long. It's like 60, 70 pages, but then there are a million links that are built into it. She went through every one of those documents, every one of the links, and she did like a 2-page or a 3-page chart with a bulleted summary of all of the major points in a way that you can compare from school to school what each school is doing to respond to, for example, bathroom cleaning, or what each school is doing, for example, with respect to visitors to the building. So there's categories across the left side of the page, and then across the top of the page are each of the schools, and built into the matrix is a bulleted summary of the most critical points from the documents, so that you have like a 2 or 3 page summary that you can look at instead of having to go through the massive 80-page document. Although you're welcome to do that, and some of you have already, but we thought this might be a nice way for you to have some quick references. So I will post that tomorrow as well. And I will put that link on the email that I send out to families once I have all of the answers, which I will not have one of the answers until after my meeting with Dr. Alexander Scott from RIDO, and that meeting is scheduled for 12 to 1 tomorrow. So I'll ask the question then, and then shortly after we'll get that answer in the FAQ, and I'll post that out for everybody. And then let's talk about the surveys. So just to be really, really clear, there is a survey that's been out for months now. And that survey is, are you going to choose full distance learning for your child, or are you going to send your child in for in-person learning under whatever the scenario is that the governor says we're clear for? So that is only for families that at this point in time, they are not comfortable sending their child to school. They have concerns, they have health concerns, the child has health concerns, whatever the rationale, we don't need to know your rationale. If you have chosen distance learning, you just have to tell us in that survey. If you are choosing in-person learning, you just have to tell us in that survey. Most of you have, because we have like 92% of all families that have responded pre-K to 12 on that survey. If you have not responded to that survey, then go in there and put a response. If you have responded and you forgot what you said, then go in and put your current response, and I'll delete your old one even if it's the same. Or if you know that you've changed your mind, just go into that survey and enter a new response, because every day, twice a day, I'm going through the document, deleting duplicate responses. I'm deleting the older response for duplicate responses, so I have accurate numbers on a daily basis of our distance learning kids and our in-person kids. That's the first piece of information that I need. You don't need to go into that document unless you know that you need to change your response, or you completely forgot what your response was and you just want to make sure that we know what it is. So go in and do that for me. That only takes a minute. It's super quick. It's the child's name, first and last name, what grade they're going into, and what the choice is, what the selection is. That's it. It should take you 2 minutes. There are some other questions which you can answer, but they are not required. You can certainly leave those blank if that's your preference, no problem. The second survey that I sent out in the email where I communicated this forum is a new survey, even though the question might seem very similar to something that I had previously sent out. There is a little bit of a nuance to that question. I really need every family to tell me, under the partial return model, are you choosing, and you're going to make a decision for me, and you're going to stick with it for 2 weeks, but are you choosing to send your child in all of the days, or are you choosing to send your child in only on the designated town days, which is Monday, Tuesday, Exeter, Thursday, Friday, West Greenwich? That's under the partial plan. You got to tell me what you want, because I'm going to give you exactly what you ask for. You just have to ask for it. And that's going to help us to design the class list so that we can make sure that they're all evenly balanced, and we have, the class sizes on any given day that can help us to meet all of the safety parameters. I need 100% response. you can all help me by spreading the word to your friends that you don't see on this call. Put it on Facebook, put it on a billboard in front of your house. I don't care what you do, but spread the word, get as many people to respond as possible. That will help us to create and finalize class lists faster, which will get you your child's teacher faster. Because otherwise, if we don't have all the responses, we need to start calling people again, because we want to make sure that we give you what you're looking for. Okay. So that's the question about partial return. But there is also the same question about the full return. So this is what I expect the governor to say on Monday. I expect her to say, Exeter West Greenwich, you are clear to open, full return. All kids at the elementary school can return all 5 days. Remember, under the partial plan, we're only having in-person learning 4 days a week. Under the full person return, the restrictions are much less significant. We're going to have kids in every day. All kids are invited. All is good. We want your child in, but if you're uncomfortable with that and you really want to, even when the governor gives permission, you feel strongly that you don't want your child in every day, you can still opt for that. So there is a question that gives you the right to say, listen, I'm just, even under full return, I'm just not comfortable. I want to send my kid on the designated days. Tell me that. Because in the absence of an answer, I'm going to assume that your child is coming in every single day under the full return model. But for the partial return model, I need a response for every single child. And again, it's going to seem like I kind of already answered this question, kind of, but answer it again, because it's a brand new survey and I'm just starting from scratch and collecting that data so that we can use it to create those class lists. That's what I need from you. And those are the last 2 surveys that are out there, and you only need to respond to the one about distance learning or in-person learning if you need to change your answer. And then that other survey that was in yesterday's email, again, super quick. Just tell me if you want your child to be in every day or on the designated town days for partial return in particular, but you can also make that option for full return. There is nothing in the survey about limited return. Again, we're not even going to be there on September 14th. That's not going to be the reentry plan for Exeter West Greenwich. But in the event that we go down that path at some point in the future, then that's where your child has either been invited or you've requested that we provide in-person service 5 days a week under the limited return model. We have, again, I'll repeat this, we have not contacted every single family to let them know what the decision is, but those conversations have started to happen, I believe, today. And I will send out a reminder to all of the schools, and most of the principals are on right now anyway. So let this be your reminder. Make sure that the families know that what the decision is for the child, or talk to the family to make sure that a decision can be made together. So those conversations will happen outside of a survey. There is a request form. If you can't find the request form, send an email to any of the emails that are listed on this chat. The principals, the special education director, and myself will make sure that it gets in the right hands for your consideration. And so that's it. That's what I need from you. I think I've covered everything. Let me just see if we have any other questions. Okay. Are there plexiglass dividers on all desks? No. And that is because there are some fire codes that we need to worry about. And it is not recommended in classrooms where the kids are in stable pods, because the plexiglass actually will hold the particles, and so they have to be cleaned on a regular basis anyway. And so it would become a little bit of a nightmare in order for that to happen. We are recommending that those are available in the pullout rooms, in the small groups where the kids are leaving their pod to work with an outside teacher, like a speech therapist or a reading specialist, if that's a service that the child needs, or a special educator. But they are not recommended or required in classrooms where the kids are in stable pods anyway, because it will not prevent molecules in the air from reaching the other children. They can hop over the plexiglass divider. Okay. All right, the survey only gives the two options, in-person or distance learning. That's correct. So the first survey is that you're just saying, I either want full distance learning or I will do in-person learning, whatever the plan is. So if it's full return, partial, whatever it is. So you're just telling me that you're going to send your kid to school, or you're going to not send your child to school at all. They're going to stay home for full distance learning. That's the first survey. The second survey that is in the email that I sent out yesterday is the new one. And that's where it says, okay, I've decided I'm sending my child to school. So this is my preference for sending my child to school. I want them every day. I want them on the town designated days. So it's two separate questions. There's I should say, if you've chosen full distance learning, you do not need to fill out the survey about whether you want to send your kid to school 5 days a week or 2 days a week, because you've already made the determination that you're sending your child to school 0 days a week. So it doesn't even make sense. So that survey is only for the families that are sending their child to school. And it's for kindergarten through grade 6 only, since preschool is going to school every day under all plans because their class sizes are small enough already. Okay. I have not gotten emails. I love that you put that out there for everybody to see.
It's all set, Jim. I handle it privately.
Awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. I love it. Yep. So and anybody that's not getting emails, so I'm going to just say a couple of things. Either you can send us a request to add you to the email list, which we are happy to do, or you always can go to the COVID-19 tab on the front page of our website, because Jeremy, who's our technology guru, he's hosting this meeting right now. But every communication that I have sent out to families, he posts right on that page, and the most recent ones are at the top, and you can scroll down and see every single communication that I've sent out since this whole thing started. So if you ever miss anything, that is a place that kind of captures the history of all of the communications from the district, and you're free to go to that at any time. So there's a couple of ways for you to make sure that you always get information. But if you need to be added to any email list, please just let us know, or type it into the chat right now. You can type it privately to Jeremy Taylor, and he'll take care of that for you. Okay. All right, good question. So if a child tests positive in my child's class, can I opt to keep her home for the 2-week period to limit exposure to others and to monitor for symptoms? So that's a really great question, because the guidance says that they're only going to require kids within a particular radius to be quarantined. That means that anybody outside of that radius is not required to be quarantined. But if as a parent you feel like, I'm really not comfortable with that, and in order to maintain the maximum level of safety, I'm opting to quarantine my child for that period of time, then yes, we will allow it, and no, it will not count against your child in terms of an attendance violation. Okay. Will kindergartners get to see the school beforehand or have any kind of a welcome day? So the 14th is the first day of school for 1 through 12. The 14th is an orientation day for kindergarten, where the child and I believe one parent can come into the building at designated times in small groups, and it will all be scheduled to meet with the teacher, to see the building. If there are any concerns like high levels of anxiety, things like that, where you feel, that's just not going to cut it, it won't be enough, then our buildings are actually open. We have staff in the buildings, administrators, the secretarial staff. Just call the school and say, it's really important for my child to see the school. There are some concerns about anxiety. We need to make him or her feel comfortable. They will set up an appointment with you. And in most cases, the principal or the assistant principal will provide a tour. We just ask you to come with your masks, and we're asking people not to touch things, but we can bring you through the school. If at that time we know who the child's teacher is, which we don't yet, we can show you that particular classroom. But whatever it is that you think is going to help your child feel comfortable, then we will help you to make that happen. Just let us know. Okay. Okay. All right. So some questions about, what about the case where one child is quarantined due to a positive case in their classroom, but then they have a sibling that's at home? Will the sibling need to be quarantined? I don't remember the answer to that question, but it is in the playbook where it tells you exactly who must be quarantined. And the nurses know this playbook pretty much inside and out, and they will always be required to consult with the Department of Health, who are going to kind of lead the communications out to the families and let us know precisely who has to be quarantined. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I can either look it up for you, or you can kind of scan that playbook that's posted on the COVID tab. And that particular issue is addressed in that playbook. I do remember talking about it. If you find it and you want to send me an email outside of this forum, feel free to do it and I'll find it for you. No problem. Can we set up a meeting with the nurse prior to the start of school? Absolutely. So because this is an elementary forum, we do have nurses that are identified for both of our schools. The Metcalf nurse is Lisa Wynn, and then the Wawaloom nurse is Carrie Ann Hokeness. And so maybe, Allie, could you type their addresses in as well? So we'll put the addresses for the two nurses into the chat. We are in the process of finalizing the hiring of our nurse for the junior senior high school. And Carrie Ann will also be responsible for Lynham, but we have a nurse who will be consulting with us at Lynham as well for an additional layer of support, just so that we have, because that building is super small and we don't have a full-time nurse on site. But we wanted to make sure that there was some additional support available there. But the two nurses, the one for Wawaloom, the one for Metcalf, we're going to put their email addresses right there. So just copy that one down. And if you have a medical concern, send the nurse an email and she will be in touch with you to set up a meeting. Okay. All right. So I've reached the end of the questions. Any last questions, last concerns, comments, anything that you want to say before we close out? You can put it in the chat. You can say it out loud, unmute yourself, whatever you want. I hope this was helpful. And next week is September. So full return, send your kids to us. We can't wait to see them again. All right, please fill out the surveys and look for the follow-ups tomorrow that I told you about, tomorrow afternoon. Get back to us with any questions. All right, thanks so much. Have a great night. Oh, a good question that I missed. Let me just see. Somebody just said there's a good question that I missed. Let me.
The timestamp on the question is 7:59.
If my child needs to be quarantined due to exposure, will there be any distance learning for them for the 2 weeks under quarantine?
Yes. So We expect that there will be pockets of children who will have to float in and out of distance learning, even if they're in an in-person classroom. And we are prepared to provide support for those children, for sure. Thanks. Thanks for pointing that out. I thought I hit them all, but great. All right. Wawalum nurse. Let me put that in there right now.
Sorry, I was trying to find her name on the website.
She's too new for us to know who she is, right?
So her last name is Hokeness, Hokeness. Can you just like type that in and see if her email comes up? I want to make sure I spelled her first name correctly. I usually just like pretend to write an email so that it pops up and I can just look at the. I'm working on it. Oh yeah, all right, awesome. So somebody got an email from the nurse and
There we go.
all right, so you guys are really helping me out. I love it. Thank you so much. All right, so it's CRIEANNE. Yep, Hokeness at perfect. Okay, so I think now it's in the chat like a few times. So we got it. All right, so hopefully the person that needed that email is still on the chat, still on the line here. Thank you for sharing that, Tiffany. I appreciate it. All right, Chris got it. All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for your help, Jeremy and Marie and Allie, Lori. Thank you all for your help. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to seeing your kiddos.
Thank you, everyone.